Hello everyone, Lore Master of Sotek here, and today's video is very important because I need your help. Every single one of you who somehow get talked into watching this video, whether you're another content creator, whether you're a Warhammer fan, a Total War Warhammer fan, whatever, I literally need each one of you to help me. And the reason is because I think we have an opportunity right now to influence Games Workshop to allow Creative Assembly to create some factions that otherwise will be impossible to do. And the reason for that is because what you see here on my screen right now is this week is the big community survey for 2019. So just a quick overview for any of you that are unfamiliar with Games Workshop and the big community survey. Games Workshop is of course the company who owns the intellectual property, there we go, to Warhammer, which is the basis for Total War Warhammer and allows us to have all of these magical, crazy races fighting each other. Whether it's your Aztec dinosaurs, your undead Egyptians, your green-skinned soccer hooligans that live in the Badlands, or your German empire with British accents, the Arthurian French Bretonians, you know, just these awesome crazy clashes that's a mix-up of real-world history, greatly exaggerated of course, and fantasy slapped together and then all made to fight each other for our entertainment. It's great and awesome, right? But a lot of people, myself included, have probably been noticing a suspicious lack of interest for human races outside of just like Bretonia and the Empire. I personally think there is a very, very, very high likelihood we're going to see Kislev at some point, who are essentially the Russians or Eastern Europeans. I don't want to like pigeonhole them and someone be like, that's not technically that culture, whatever, you know what I mean. I think we're probably going to see them because they were officially supported in Warhammer Fantasy during, as part of the Dogs of War, but you could get away with running a Kislevite army without it being too difficult. And they're also like right smack in the middle of the world, and they just seem like a likely faction. But two factions that I think will not happen without your help will be the likes of Araby, who of course are in kind of like the Middle East, and Cathay, who are the China of the Warhammer Fantasy universe. Now, these are two factions that have vague support. Like, Araby, if I remember correctly, was actually playable in a game called War Master, which was an offshoot of Warhammer Fantasy, but it wasn't Warhammer Fantasy. I need to make that clear. It's not Warhammer Fantasy. It was kind of like a side game, almost like Blood Bowl, just a little bit more directly tied. But just because something existed in War Master, I would strongly push for no one to be like, well, that means it's going to be in the game. Because we haven't really seen any evidence to support that. And Games Workshop kind of hit a point in about 7th edition, where they kind of looked at a lot of their old intellectual property and started like burying it underneath the ground. Which for some, that was good. Like the Pygmies, those are probably best left buried. But like a lot of people want to see the Amazons, who are humans, of course, well, vaguely human at least, depending on which edition of lore you're reading, or the Arabians, or the people of Cathay. And then of course there are like the people of Nippon, which is Japan, and the people of End, which is India. These places have, the Orient essentially, has such a plethora of rich, fascinating history and rich, fascinating mythos, or creation myths, or gods, or monsters, or whatever, that I would do anything to see these guys come to the Warhammer Fantasy stage and be able to go up toe-to-toe against your Lizardmen and your Demons of Chaos and your Ogre Kingdoms and the Empire and Vampire Counts. And I think a lot of you would like to see that too. Because, you know, variety is the spice of life. And at the end of the day, I think that's like the best way to support gamers, is by giving choice and variety, like more factions. And I would hate to see the human factions in Warhammer Fantasy get pigeonholed into just the Western. With like, if we got like Kislev, Empire, and Bretonia, that could really be it. Without what I'm suggesting here, which is that we should use this community survey as our opportunity as a community together to reach out to Games Workshop and say, We want you to support publicly and loudly for Creative Assembly to create like Cathay. I think would be the best place to plant our flag. I know there are a lot of people that probably think like Araby would be cooler, or we should focus on Nippon or Ind, but I'm going to politely ask that if you're watching this video and you want to try and support the idea, that you just focus on Cathay for right now, because I think Cathay is kind of the biggest hurdle. If we get Cathay, then everything else will be easy, honestly, in comparison. The thing about Cathay is that they were never officially supported as an army. There were a lot of little like hints and little tidbits, like we know there was a celestial dragon emperor. We know that there were like kind of terracotta soldiers sort of things. If you read like a lot of the older books, like back in 5th edition, there were little hints here and there of what Cathay was like, and there were even characters from Cathay and yada yada yada. But wouldn't it be amazing to actually get Cathay as a playable army? As a DLC, or as a maybe even a core base faction for game 3, because we don't know who the 4th mystery starting faction is. We know Demons of Chaos, Chaos Dwarves, and Ogre Kingdom seem like shoo-ins, but the 4th one is kind of tricky. Personally, I think it's Kislev. That seems very likely, but maybe it could be Cathay. Maybe with our support. The thing is, I don't think Creative Assembly looks at any of those factions and is like sitting there like, oh, we're not going to do that. I mean, are you kidding? Humans, especially Cathay, they literally have 3 kingdom assets like floating around, which granted, I'm assuming it would be easy to like take 3k assets and like into Warhammer, but that's probably not true. But they would at least have like a team that's very experienced with Chinese aesthetic and mythology that could, like, I'm sure would be very excited to transform that into something magical in a fantasy setting. And I don't think Games Workshop, without us making a big ruckus, is going to allow that to happen. And the reason for that is because you have to remember that from Games Workshop's perspective, they are laser focused on moving forwards. They're like, Warhammer Fantasy is back behind their shoulder. They don't, like, if you go to a Games Workshop store, most of the time you can't get the people that work there to even talk to you about Warhammer Fantasy. Like, if you show up and you're like, man, I'm a big fan of Warhammer Fantasy, most of them will just get outright uncomfortable, or because they either, granted, some of them may not know what you're talking about, but that's a little silly. Most of them are probably just in kind of a position where they're like, yeah, we don't really like support that. Like, you know, we're like, oh, do you want to play Age of Sigmar? And if you're like, nah, I just kind of want to like pick up fantasy models so I can like build for fun. You know, sometimes you can get some weird reactions. And I genuinely think that that's because Games Workshop kind of is in a funny position with fantasy, and that fantasy is at the most popular it's ever been after they killed the setting, which I don't want to get into that here. What I want to focus on is this survey. So what I'm literally asking everybody to do is you can scroll down, and in whatever language you want, you just click on Take Survey, and the survey shows up, and it's going to ask you like a ton of questions, and at the end, along some point, you will get the ability to basically say, what do you want to see in the future of Warhammer Fantasy for 2019 or beyond? And if we as a community could come together with hundreds of thousands of voices and say, give us Cathay, like, come out and say, hey, Creative Assembly, you guys should do Cathay. Maybe we'll give you guys like a model line for Cathay. Like, imagine if you could pick up, if like Games Workshop released models to go along with Total War Warhammer, and you could like, you know, play Cathay and Age of Sigmar. Hell, who cares at that point, right? But just being able to have Games Workshop know that we want it, know that the community really, really wants it enough to show up in force on their doorstep and, you know, pound the ground. But I think it's important to be nice about it. Like, don't be a dick, you know? One of the things I've always been really nervous, because I've known this survey is coming up, and I've been watching it really carefully. And one of the things that I've been really nervous about making this video is drawing attention to it, and then the Total War community comes out and just acts like a bunch of assholes, which is going to just hurt the cause, not help it. So, you know, I would implore that you follow the old philosophy that I'm sure most people's parents told them when they were 5 years old, which is, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. Like, I would rather you shut up than participate if you're going to be a jerk, because you're just hurting everybody at that point. You're not helping. Because although, yes, Games Workshop is a big company, and a lot of people look at big companies and they're like, oh, I can be an asshole to him. It's a company. Who cares? You got to remember that there's a person who has to read this. So try not to be a jerk. And I think we'll catch more flies with honey. That's my philosophy. And it's worked pretty well for me so far, at least in life. So without trying to drag this on any further, please, I beg you, go to gamesworkshop.com, just like this. You just go to games-workshop.com, and then over here you click on Warhammer Community. It takes you to this page. You see it right here, the big community survey. You click on that, and I'll have links to it in the description and the comment section down below. Fill out the survey and make a push for Games Workshop to publicly support Creative Assembly giving us Cathay for Total War Warhammer 3. I think we have a legitimate chance here to expand the rosters and races we can see in Warhammer Fantasy. And whether your end goal is to get Amazons or Araby or Nippon or End or Fish People or whatever random ass race it is in Warhammer Fantasy that you have emotionally attached yourself to, halflings, whatever, if we can make a statement here and support the idea of Warhammer Fantasy expanding well beyond its borders to allow even more content in, not only are we looking at a better end product for Warhammer Fantasy, but if you're a big Warhammer Fantasy fan, we're even looking at a potential revival of Warhammer Fantasy in the long game. I'm not talking about this year. I'm not talking about next year. I'm not talking about 2025. I'm maybe talking about 2030. But Warhammer Fantasy is still alive. I know a lot of people get super miffed talking about the end times or Age of Sigmar or whatever, but there is a difference between Age of Sigmar and Warhammer Fantasy, and if anybody tells you otherwise, they're lying. Because they're just dumb, or they're being paid by somebody. The game is still alive, just in a rather weird limbo right now. And Games Workshop has not really publicly come out and supported Total War Warhammer in a really meaningful way. They've kind of shut their traps about it ever since Grombrindal, which was 2 years ago, and have kept themselves as far away from it as they can. And at least it feels that way. Could be that someone from GW ends up watching this and is like, man, this Lore Master of Sotek guy's a fucking idiot. But from a community perspective, especially someone like me who literally reads the community page every day on Games Workshop, and I actively participate in and collect Age of Sigmar books and novels, and I have a Night Haunt army that I'm painting up from scratch and yada yada. It really feels like Games Workshop does not like to talk about fantasy. And they should be proud to talk about fantasy, because I know for them it's uncomfortable that they killed it off, but that's not necessarily permanent, even though that's not what we're here for today. But they could at least support it in its most popular format right now, which is the Total War Warhammer series, especially since Total War Warhammer is only going to keep getting bigger. The Everchosens are getting more and more popular with bigger and bigger fan bases. The content is continuing to increase in quality and quantity, and we are probably only halfway through the game's life cycle, which is pretty crazy when you think about it, compared to almost any video game out there. This is a golden era for us, and if we can come together politely as a community and push forward to say, give us, please, allow Creative Assembly to create Cathay, or help them create Cathay. Give us something new and amazing. Allow the fans from China and Japan and India and Vietnam and whatever other countries you want to bring up, Indonesia, Korea, whatever, allow them to be like, oh my god, the history that I'm familiar with, the monsters that I fell in love with, the things that I think would be amazing in a fantasy setting could finally show up in Warhammer Fantasy, and it could be like a true conglomerate of all of humans' history, the biggest and badass moments in human history, and the biggest and badass creatures and monsters and legends and magic from our fantasy worlds, and smash them together into Warhammer Fantasy. I mean, it'll be a fantasy universe unlike anything that's ever existed. In my opinion, it already is. Like, I know there are a lot of people that are like, Lord of the Rings, blah, blah, blah. But it's really something so spectacular and amazing and different. Not because everything in it is original, because it's not. It's because the way that everything is been fused together is original. So, I've been talking now for 15 minutes. It feels a lot longer than that, probably because I've had to do multiple takes of this, and hopefully this is the one that won't suck. But in any event, as a closing word, just to keep you all focused, if you're a content creator, feel free to steal this video, like just download it or make your own video, but post this video to your favorite forums, send it to your friends, your family if they give a shit, or Reddit, whatever, and help me get Cathay to be a reality. Because if we can get Cathay to be a reality, I mean, we could do anything. We could get Araby to be a reality, and we could get just all these other amazing factions that would make the game so magical, more than it already is, because it's already pretty fucking magical. But I don't know. This is my passion. This is what I care about. So if you've somehow watched this and you think it's stupid, I don't know how you made it this far. And if you're like, man, this guy's just a total fucking nerd, then yeah, sure, whatever, fine, I don't care. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'm gonna shut up now so you can hopefully go fill out this community survey and then get back to watching all of the amazing Prophet and the Warlock DLC and free LC info that's been pouring out over the last day. And yeah, so thanks again for watching. Hope you're all doing well, and feel free to post down in the comment section like I did it, like whenever you complete your survey, and maybe we can get like 10,000 or hopefully tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people uniting for this bizarre attempt at getting Games Workshop to actually look at its redheaded stepchild Total War Warhammer and like pat it on the head and say like, you can have that toy. So yeah, thanks guys, bye. Hey guys, just real quick, I wanted to let y'all know that I just went through my survey, and it's a bit of a doozy. It's a pretty long survey, but at the very end, there's a section where they basically ask, like, is there anything you'd like to see added to the hobby? And you can put whatever stuff you want there. And then below that, there's essentially a section that says, is there anything else you would like us to know? And that is where you should probably put your request for them to publicly support and help Creative Assembly design a Cathay DLC faction, or Cathay faction DLC for Total War Warhammer 3. Thank you for watching. Bye.